Stand, Kneel, Now What? Season 3, Episode 12. What I Miss About Being a Protestant.
Hi, my name is Karen. I like to say that I'm the good kind of Karen. I am first and foremost a daughter of God, a wife, mom of two, and I recently came home to the Catholic Church. I love my faith so deeply that I want others to love it too. Whether you are a cradle Catholic, Catholic curious, or you have come home to the Catholic Church as an adult like I have, Stand, Kneel, Now What is the show for you. Through my love and lots of blunders, my goal is to help you along your faith journey. Our paths may be different, but all of our roads need to lead home so that we can be with our Father.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Stand, Kneel, Now What? I'm your host, Karen Estep. And this week's episode really came from scrolling on Instagram last night and trying to figure out what exactly I wanted this week's episode to be about. I was going to try to cram Our Lady of Lourdes into one just long episode, but I feel like that would not have done Our Lady of Lourdes justice. So as I was scrolling last night, there was a reel that popped up in, when you're just scrolling and, not paying attention to what you're doing. And there is a Catholic, I believe he's a podcaster. He's at least an Instagram person. And he had to have been a former Protestant because one of the things that he said is, what are some things I miss being a former Protestant? And he was talking about how he misses being able to drink coffee at the praise service on a Sunday. And I was like, oh, that is what I should do, because there are some things that I miss about being a Protestant. So we are going to get into that in just a second. But first, we're going to finish our last week with our prayer. All right, we are finishing up God of Life. This will be our last week saying this prayer. And this prayer is attributed to Saint Augustine. So here we go. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God of life, there are days when the burdens we carry chafe our shoulders and wear us down. When the road seems dreary and endless, the skies gray and threatening, when our lives have no music in them and our hearts are lonely, and our souls have lost their courage. Flood the path with light, we beseech you. Turn our eyes to where the skies are full of promise. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right. The other thing I want to do is preface this episode with I did not write down any notes, so we're in a very organic space right now. And B, I am not leaving the Catholic Church. And part of what I want today's episode to be about are some reasons that I miss being a Protestant, but also the reason I will not leave the Catholic Church, and something I'm very, very passionate about. And I'm trying to instill in my religious education, my 5th grade class, and also in my freshman class at the high school I teach at. So recently I put a post on Instagram, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where I just kind of laid it all on the line. I am tired. And I got to thinking about it because I said something recently that, like, I'm a baby Catholic, and someone was like, no, 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 you're on year 3. This is, if it's almost year 4, because if you count our OCIA year plus the 3 years we've been in the Catholic Church. Someone told me I had to say that I'm a toddler Catholic. And I'm in this space where I know enough, but I don't know everything. And by the way, I understand that I will not ever be able to know everything about the Catholic faith. But I know enough, and I feel like I've been running this race for almost 3 years, and I'm just Catholic tired. This Lent has also been just incredibly hard for many, many reasons. It has spiritually kicked my butt, and I am frustrated with myself, and I'm frustrated with the space that I'm in. And I wanted to share things that I miss about being a Protestant, because I know that I can't be the only Catholic person to have come home to the Catholic faith as an adult that at one point goes, you know what? I'm tired. And that's just where I'm at. I'm also a teacher full time. So it is spring, and it feels very, very springy. And we're so close to the end, but not quite. So I'm just tired all the way around. And both of my children are involved in lacrosse. We are on a lacrosse field at least 5 out of the 7 days a week right now. So all in all, this has just been a very tiresome spring, and we are an Easter people from Pope St. John Paul II. So I'm ready for Easter. So let me just get into it. Let's just talk about it. So when my husband and I were a Protestant, and this, I just want to also say, like, all of these are from my point of view. I'm sure there are Protestants that feel different. I'm sure there are Catholics that feel different. But this is my podcast, so I'm going to share how I feel. And if you don't feel that way, that's great. We're just going to use this as a friendly talking space where I get to tell you how I feel. And, if you have ever felt this way, then you're not alone. So, in my opinion, being a Protestant was a lot easier than being a Catholic. A, there's just the expectations are different, and I mean that in a very loving way. But the biggest reason I feel like it was just easier as a Protestant is in Catholicism, you cannot miss a Sunday mass. Now, you don't have to go to daily mass. It's encouraged, but you don't have to do it. And where it becomes a mortal sin is if you miss a Sunday mass. And there are times, a lot lately, I'm probably more than not, that I just wish it wasn't a mortal sin to miss a mass. And I know that people are going to roll their eyes and be like, yes, Karen, but I, I don't know. We go to the 8 o'clock Sunday service most of the time. And there have been a few Sundays where I have just been like, man, it would have been a lot easier to not, just to not. We missed a lot of Sundays when my husband and I were going to the Methodist church. In fact, reflecting on this whole process and just things lately, we would only go to our Methodist church service the first Sunday of the month a lot of times, because that was the Sunday that they served communion. And I was really only interested in taking communion. And they may do things differently now, but when we were there, it was only served on the first Sunday of the month. And so we would go one Sunday a month. We'd go on the first, and then we would make up some excuse the second, third, and fourth Sundays of the month to not go. And then we go back on the first Sunday of the month. And it was just our pattern. And when it's not an obligation to go to Sunday service, it becomes really easy to skip. And oh, we're tired. Oh, and our children were fairly young when we were part of this Methodist church. The kids were up late last night, or we didn't get any sleep because of A, B, C, D, or, it just became super easy to skip. And that's not good. In fact, that should be one of the reasons why I love Catholicism, and that I have to go to Sunday Mass, because the more you skip, the less you're in community, the less you're learning about Christ. But it's a heck of a lot easier. It's a heck of a lot easier to skip. And, and no one held us accountable. Like, we didn't even hold ourselves accountable. So when you have a community of Catholics where, they know that it's a mortal sin to miss Sunday church, I know right now that if I were to miss a bunch, our priest would reach out and say, "Hey, what's going on?" Or we would have friends. In fact, we actually switched the mass time that we were going to instead of the 8 o'clock. And one of our friends reached out and said, "Hey, are you going to mass? Like, I haven't seen you. You haven't been in the pews. We haven't talked." And we just had to explain to him, like, "Thanks for checking in on us, but we're going to, this time instead of the normal 8 o'clock time." And it's good, but sometimes waking up that early on a Sunday is really hard. It's just really hard. And that kind of goes into like the next reason that I miss Protestantism some days is I sometimes just want to drink my coffee on the way into church and not have to fast. So for my Protestant friends, in the Catholic Church, you are required to fast an hour before you receive communion. Now, there are kind of a couple of different schools of thoughts. I personally start fasting. So if we go to the 8 o'clock service, I start fasting at 7 o'clock. And I try my hardest not even to drink water because I want to really, truly be fasting. And sometimes it is a struggle, and other times it's not. It becomes easier, the more you do it. But there are some Catholics, though, that believe, if communion is typically served at 8:30 at the 8 o'clock mass, then I can stop fasting at 7:30 and be fine. It's kind of, there's no hard and fast rule on that hour, but it needs to be an hour. And, there are just some days when I'm dragging and I need a little motivator to be up that early, that I really, really wish I could just drink my coffee on the way into church. In a lot of Protestant services, you can drink coffee in the sanctuary. You can drink coffee during the service. That is not done in the Catholic space. One, because of fasting, and two, because, we believe that Jesus is present in the tabernacle, and we are choosing to be completely reverent when we come into the sanctuary. So I do miss my coffee on the way into church, but it is a sacrifice that I'm willing to continue. Another thing that I personally just feel that Protestants do a bit better, however, I will say, because I know she is a listener and she and I have talked about this, our religious education person at my parish is doing a phenomenal job. And she and I have had this conversation just about the differences in Protestant denominations and how they catechize their youth, as opposed to like what Catholics are doing to catechize youth. And she is very passionate about it. And she's also very passionate about catechizing adults, which I think is something that is lacking in both the Protestant and Catholic spaces. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But I know you're listening and I think you're amazing and wonderful. I just really like how I was raised in our youth program as part of the Salvation Army. So for my Catholic friends who've not been to a Protestant church, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes what happens is they will have the adult service, and then you can go and drop your kiddos off in various classrooms, and they will do an activity, a craft, a song, a Bible verse that goes along with the adult service, but they're not in with all the adults. They're in with kiddos their age, and they can get the energy out, and they can sing songs that, you know, are cute and fun, and they learn the Bible. And sometimes I miss that because we used to do that at our old church. We would, send the kids down to children's church, and then we would go to the adult church so that we could be spiritually filled, and then we could go fill the kids. Um, and that's just not done. That's not done in the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church really wants families to worship all together, which I really, really appreciate most of the time. But there are sometimes when my kids are extra whiny or they get bored or they're just a lot of energy and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I wish we just had a children's church to like push you into for a little bit." The other thing I really appreciate about my Protestant upbringing is singing biblical songs. Now, I know there are some Catholics that watch Veggie Tales with their kids. We watch Veggie Tales with our kids and we'll sing the silly songs. Uh, However, it feels like not all Catholics do that. And so even sometimes when I'm teaching the fifth grade religious ed, they they kind of cringe when we're reading a Bible verse and I'm like, "Oh, I have a song for this." And they just kind of cringe. A, they're fifth graders, they're too cool for me. But B, sometimes they've never either heard the Bible verse or they don't know how to find the Bible verse or anything like that. So I really appreciate that in the church that I grew up in, that was like the standard. Like, kids were learning Bible verses through singing songs. And sometimes I still sing the songs because it's just been instilled in me that, this is one way to learn the Bible. And like I said, there are a lot of Catholics that are waking up to this, that Protestants are catechizing their kiddos in very effective ways. And I think that we're moving towards that as a Catholic church. Where I think both Protestants and Catholics fail, our religious education person is really doing a lot to help this situation, especially in our parish. I think Protestants and Catholics fail in making sure that the adults are catechized. And I say this only because, I was catechized as a child and then as a teenager in the Salvation Army. And I could probably tell you still most of the tenets of the faith of the Salvation Army. However, when my husband and I joined the Methodist Church, if someone were to ask me what the tenets of faith are for the Methodist Church, I don't think I could tell you. And besides that we believe in the Trinity and we believe in Jesus as our savior. Like that's as far as I could do. Like if someone were to say, "Well, what does a Methodist believe in baptism?" I would have been like, "Well, my kids were baptized." Or if someone were to ask me, the reason why we only did communion on the first Sunday of the month, I couldn't tell you. And so poorly catechized adults don't do a great job at catechizing their children because it can be overwhelming. So I think in all spaces of the Christian denominations, we really need to focus on making sure that the adults that have children or even don't have children are really strong in the theology of their faith and the tenets of their faith. And, we're not just going into a church because we like it, but we're also going into a church because it aligns with our theology. And that is something when my husband and I left the Protestant church or left our Methodist church to join the Catholic church, they really take the time in OCIA, formerly RCIA, to make sure you know what you're signing up for because they know that people will get burnt out. They know that being Catholic is hard. They know that there are, rules in the Catholic faith that aren't necessarily there in other denominations. And so it becomes this, well, what do we do with the people that are quote unquote cradle Catholic and that may have gone through 12 years of Catholic school, but still don't know what we believe? So I do think as Christians, we need to be more aware of what our tenets of faith are and what exactly our different churches teach. And, that way, if you get a pastor that says something that doesn't align with your tenet of faith, you're able to kind of, in a Christian like way, call them out and say, no, 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 that's not what it says on this statement. And that's not what our tenet of faith says. And then you can also go and catechize your own kids and say, well, this is why we believe this. And, Baptists believe that baptism is just a symbol because of this and all this other stuff. So I do think our parish is heading in the right direction because once again, we have a phenomenal religious education director. it just takes time. Like just anything that takes time. And so those are all the reasons. There's probably more that there are times that I really grieve being a Protestant. And they seem like silly reasons now, having said them out loud a couple of times, but I do sometimes just miss our former life where, on Sundays, if we didn't show up, we didn't show up and no one was checking in on us and we could just kind of fly under the radar. However, I won't leave the Catholic Church because I love the Eucharist, which is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. I will not give that up. I am so passionate about how amazing and what a true, beautiful gift the Eucharist actually is that I can't go back. And Jesus calling me home to the Catholic Church and calling me to take communion and calling me to receive the Eucharist is what keeps me going. And it's my hope. It's, like I said at the beginning, this Lent has kicked my spiritual booty. And man, I didn't think I was going to cry on this episode. I will forever come home to the Eucharist. I will forever defend the Eucharist, and I will forever try to light spiritual fires in whoever I'm teaching, whether it's adults or teenagers or fifth graders or kindergartners. I will forever try to get them to understand that the Eucharist is so amazing. And, and I'm hoping to have Father Robert Spitzer back on to talk more about Eucharistic miracles. And that is what keeps me coming. That is what keeps me going is reading more about these Eucharistic miracles and just I get chills when I talk about the Eucharist. I get chills when I talk about the miracles that happen. And so that is what's keeping me going, and that is what's keeping me with my feet planted in the Catholic Church. I think it's normal for people that have come home to the Catholic Church to miss certain aspects of their former churches. I think it's normal for us to get overwhelmed and burnt out. And what I can say for those of you that are feeling kind of like me, that are just, you feel like you ran the race really well for 3 years and now you're ready to just go, I'm done. Just remember when Christ instituted the Eucharist at the Last Supper, he wasn't just thinking about his apostles and disciples then, that he was thinking about you and I now and wanting to be in communion with you and I now, that we were in his sacred heart at the Last Supper when he instituted it. And you can show up, and it's better to show up and go through the motions and figure out what it's going to take to reignite your passion for the Catholic faith than to just give up. And so if you're like me, take some time, rest in the Lord, and know that he's always there, and he wants you to come every Sunday and receive him. And it's so just amazing to think about that we are always in his sacred heart and that he loves you, and that we are an Easter people and Easter is coming very, very soon. And so I hope if you're like me and you're a cranky toddler that you get a nap soon and that you get your snack and you get a pat on the back told that you're doing a good job, because that's kind of what I need. I'm getting it in various places. I'm trying to just really focus on, and I said it in a couple episodes ago, I am really trying to focus on the Our Father prayer, where I pray, Thy will be done, because my will's not getting me a whole lot of places right now. So I really need to focus on what God's will is for me. And if that's what it's going to take, that the Eucharist for you as well, go for it. Just focus on that prayer, Thy will be done, and focus on receiving the Eucharist. And it's going to be okay. And go take a nap. Go do that too. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go take a nap. So I am going to take the next couple of weeks off, and hopefully I will be back the last week of April. I have another interview coming with an author so that we can talk about Venerable Fulton Sheen, which I'm very excited about. So just look for the next episode to come out in a couple of weeks. I am also not going to do an odd one out this week, but I will share the results from last week. So we did Our Lady of Akita, and Akita is in Japan. So the choices for last week were sushi, ramen, or tempura. And the results are 67% of the vote came in for sushi. For some reason, that's really hard for me to say right now. Nobody voted for ramen. And then 33% of the vote came in for tempura. I am actually going to be the one that votes for ramen. Only because I don't like raw fish. And I know that you can get like tempura shrimp or fried shrimp with your sushi, or like fried crab. But typically ramen is a completely different dish. So my one vote in this goes for ramen. All right, everyone. As always, if the podcast has blessed you in any way, shape, or form, please like, share, and subscribe. I will see you in a couple of weeks, and I'm really looking forward to just getting to Easter. We've got this. We're only a couple weeks left. We can do this, everybody. I hope you have a blessed Holy Week and a blessed Easter. And I will hopefully be back the last week of April. Until then, stay blessed. Happy Easter.